I dated a guy for 1 year, but when I saw his dad, I immediately fell in love because I liked older people. When I said this, my boyfriend was furious. When I met Mark, it felt like the stars had aligned just for us. It was my first day at the new job, and I was navigating the maze of cubicles when I bumped into him. Literally. My coffee splashed everywhere, and I was mortified. But Mark just laughed it off and helped me clean up. He had this easygoing charm, a smile that could light up a room, and an infectious laugh that made even the most mundane days feel special. We quickly became friends, bonding over our mutual love of classic movies and indie music. Our office chats turned into lunch dates, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to seeing him every day. Mark was kind, thoughtful, and always knew how to make me laugh. He was the kind of guy who would bring me coffee just the way I liked it, who remembered the little things, and who made me feel special. Our relationship blossomed over the next few months. We spent our weekends exploring the city, trying out new restaurants, and getting lost in art galleries. Mark introduced me to his friends, who welcomed me with open arms, and soon I felt like a part of his world. We celebrated our 1-year anniversary with a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant, reminiscing about how far we had come. "I can't believe it's been a year," Mark said, holding my hand across the table. "It feels like we've known each other forever." "I know," I replied, smiling. "It's been amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better year." As the evening wore on, Mark grew more serious. "I was thinking," he said, "it's time you met my family. They're having a dinner next weekend. I'd love for you to come." The thought of meeting his family made my stomach do a little flip. I was excited but also nervous. This was a big step, a sign that our relationship was getting even more serious. "I'd love to," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The week leading up to the dinner was a whirlwind of nerves and anticipation. Mark reassured me that his family was great and that they would love me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety. What if they didn't like me? What if I said something wrong? My mind raced with all the possible scenarios. Finally, the day arrived. Mark picked me up and we drove to his parents' house, a beautiful old Victorian in a quiet suburb. The house was warm and inviting, with a well-manicured lawn and a garden bursting with colorful flowers. As we walked up the path, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Mark's mom, Helen, opened the door, her face lighting up with a welcoming smile. "You must be Anna," she said, pulling me into a warm hug. "Mark has told us so much about you." "It's so nice to meet you," I replied, relieved by her friendliness. Mark's dad, Richard, was in the living room setting the table. When I saw him, it felt like time stopped. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes. There was a calm confidence about him, a presence that drew me in immediately. I felt a strange flutter in my chest, something I'd never felt before. "Anna, this is my dad, Richard," Mark said, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. "Nice to meet you, Anna," Richard said, extending his hand with a warm smile. His voice was deep and soothing, and when our hands touched, I felt a spark. The dinner went smoothly, with Helen and Richard making me feel at ease. We talked about our jobs, hobbies, and funny stories from Mark's childhood. But the entire time I was hyper-aware of Richard. Every glance, every smile, every word he spoke seemed to captivate me. I couldn't explain it, but I was undeniably drawn to him. As the evening came to a close, Helen insisted I come over again soon. "It was lovely having you, Anna. You're always welcome here." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by their hospitality. Mark and I drove home in comfortable silence, but my mind was racing. I felt guilty for the way I felt about Richard, but I couldn't deny the attraction. It was confusing and overwhelming, and I didn't know what to do about it. Over the next few days, I tried to push my feelings aside, convincing myself it was just a silly crush. But every time I saw Mark, I couldn't help but think of his dad. The guilt gnawed at me, and I knew I couldn't keep it bottled up forever. One evening, as we were having dinner at my apartment, I decided to tell Mark the truth. It was eating me alive, and he deserved to know. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Mark, there's something I need to tell you," I began, my voice shaking slightly. He looked up, concern etched on his face. "What is it, Anna?" I hesitated, feeling a lump in my throat. I think I have feelings for someone else." The color drained from his face, and he set down his fork. "What do you mean?" "It's your dad," I blurted out, tears welling up in my eyes. "When I met him, I felt something I can't explain. I know it's wrong, and I hate myself for it, but I can't help how I feel." Mark's expression shifted from shock to fury. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Are you serious, Anna? My dad, how could you?" "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "Sorry? That's all you have to say?" he shouted, his face red with anger. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me." Tears streamed down my face as I watched the man I loved transform before my eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mark. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." "Get out," he said, his voice cold and hard. "I can't even look at you right now." I grabbed my coat and fled the apartment, my heart breaking with every step. I had ruined everything, and there was no going back. As I walked through the empty streets, the weight of my actions crashed down on me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to face the consequences of my choices. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a journey that would test my strength, my values, and my understanding of love. After the explosive confession and the subsequent fallout, I spent the next few days in a haze of regret and confusion. Mark's furious words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at me. But amidst the turmoil, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward Richard. It was as if meeting him had awakened something inside me that I couldn't ignore. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Mark, alternating between pleas for an explanation and angry outbursts. I couldn't blame him. I had betrayed his trust in the worst possible way. Yet I knew I needed to confront my feelings head-on, no matter how painful it was for everyone involved. A week later, Helen called me, her voice gentle and understanding. "Anna, I've heard about what happened between you and Mark," she said. "Richard and I would like to talk to you. Can you come over for dinner tonight?" My heart raced at the thought of facing Richard again, but I agreed. I owed them an explanation, if nothing else. That evening I found myself standing on the doorstep of Mark's parents' house once more. The beautiful Victorian home, with its warm lights and welcoming garden, now seemed like a battleground. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door, bracing myself for what was to come. Helen greeted me with a sad smile and hugged me tightly. "It's good to see you, Anna. Come in." Richard was sitting in the living room looking contemplative. When he saw me, his expression softened, but there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "Anna, please have a seat." I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. Helen brought out dinner and we ate in relative silence. The tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of understanding that eased some of my anxiety. After dinner we moved to the living room. Helen looked at Richard, then back at me. "Anna, we know what happened between you and Mark. He told us everything." I nodded, unable to meet their eyes. "I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused. I never wanted any of this to happen." Helen reached out and took my hand. "We believe you, Anna, but we need to understand. Why Richard?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. When I met Richard, I felt an instant connection. It was confusing and overwhelming, but it was real. I think I've always been drawn to older people, and Richard, he just seemed different. Richard looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Anna, I never intended to cause a rift between you and Mark, but I can't deny that I felt something too." His admission hung in the air, and I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Helen sighed, her eyes filled with concern. "This situation is complicated, and there's no easy solution, but we need to be honest with each other and figure out what comes next." We spent the next hour talking about our feelings, the hurt we had caused, and the path forward. Richard and Helen were understanding, but they made it clear that Mark's feelings had to be a priority. He was their son, and they couldn't ignore the pain he was going through. As the night wore on, I realized that facing my feelings was just the first step. There were no easy answers, and the journey ahead would be filled with difficult choices and emotional battles. But for the first time since the confession, I felt a sense of clarity. Helen walked me to the door and hugged me tightly. "Take care, Anna. We'll figure this out together." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "Thank you, Helen, for everything." As I left their home, I knew that my relationship with Mark was irreparably damaged, but the connection I felt with Richard was undeniable, and I couldn't walk away from it without exploring where it might lead. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way. The next day, I received a text from Mark. He wanted to meet and talk things through. I knew it would be a difficult conversation, but it was necessary. I agreed, hoping we could find some semblance of closure. We met at a small cafe, the same one where we had shared so many happy moments. Mark looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed and his face drawn. He didn't waste any time. "Anna, I don't understand how you could do this," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I loved you. We had something real." I felt a pang of guilt but forced myself to stay composed. "I know, Mark. And I did love you. But when I met your dad, something changed. I can't explain it, but it was like a switch flipped." He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "So what now? You just walk away from everything we built?" "I'm not walking away from what we had," I replied softly. "But I need to be honest with myself and with you. We deserve the chance to find real happiness, even if it means not being together." Mark stared at me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, but I appreciate your honesty. I need time to process everything." "I understand," I said, my heart aching for the pain I had caused. "Take all the time you need." As we parted ways, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. The conversation with Mark, while painful, was a necessary step toward healing. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the consequences of my actions and explore the path ahead. In the following days, I found solace in my friends, who offered their support and understanding. They listened without judgment, helping me navigate the emotional turmoil. And through it all, I remained in contact with Helen and Richard, who continued to offer their guidance and support. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to move forward with honesty and integrity. My feelings for Richard were complicated, but they were real, and I couldn't ignore them. As I took each step forward, I knew that the path would be filled with challenges and difficult decisions, but I was ready to face them head-on. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one that would test my strength, my values, and my understanding of love. And while the future was uncertain, I was hopeful that, in the end, it would lead to a place of healing and fulfillment. The days following my conversation with Mark were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. The clarity I had felt was now clouded by doubt and guilt. Every time I thought of Richard, a pang of remorse would hit me. I had hurt someone I cared deeply for, and the consequences of my actions weighed heavily on my conscience. Returning to my apartment, I found solace in the routine of daily life, but my thoughts constantly drifted back to Richard and Mark. I poured myself into work, hoping to distract my mind, but even there the tension was palpable. My co-workers noticed my distracted demeanor, but they were kind enough not to pry. One evening, unable to contain my turmoil, I reached out to my closest friend, Sarah. She had been my rock through many difficult times, and I needed her perspective more than ever. We met at our favorite cafe, a cozy spot with dim lighting and comfortable chairs that always made us feel at ease. Sarah listened intently as I poured out my heart, her expression a mix of concern and empathy. "Anna, this is a really tough situation," she said gently. "You followed your heart, but it's complicated when it involves family dynamics." "I know," I sighed. "I didn't mean to fall for Richard. It just happened. And now, I don't know what to do." She took a sip of her coffee, thinking carefully before responding. "You need to give yourself some grace, Anna. You're human and feelings are messy. But you also need to consider the long-term consequences. What do you really want?" That was the question I had been avoiding. What did I really want? The intense connection I felt with Richard was undeniable, but was it worth the potential fallout? I had to face my emotions head-on and decide what was truly best for everyone involved. A few days later, I found myself driving to a quiet park on the outskirts of town. It was a place I often went to clear my mind and find some peace. I sat on a bench overlooking a serene pond, the water reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. As I watched the ducks glide across the water, I thought about my relationship with Mark. We had shared so many good times, and he had been nothing but kind and loving to me. But something had been missing, a spark that I had only felt when I met Richard. I couldn't ignore the fact that my heart had led me in a different direction, no matter how much I wished it hadn't. I decided to write my thoughts down in a journal, hoping that putting my feelings into words would help bring some clarity. The act of writing was cathartic, and as the words flowed, I began to see my path more clearly. Dear Journal, I'm torn between the past and the future. Mark was a wonderful boyfriend, and I regret hurting him deeply. But the connection I feel with Richard is unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's confusing and overwhelming, but it's real. I need to figure out what my heart truly wants, and that means being honest with myself and with everyone involved. With a clearer mind, I decided to reach out to Richard. We needed to have an open and honest conversation about our feelings and what they meant for our future. I sent him a text asking if we could meet and talk. Richard responded quickly, suggesting we meet at a quiet cafe downtown. The next day I arrived early, my heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. When Richard walked in, his presence filled the room, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest. "Anna," he said warmly, sitting down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "We need to talk about everything." He nodded, his expression serious but kind. "Yes, we do. This situation is far from ideal, and I want to make sure we handle it with care and respect." We spent the next hour discussing our feelings, the complications of our situation, and the impact it had on everyone involved. Richard admitted that he had felt a connection with me as well, but he was deeply conflicted about pursuing anything further given the hurt it had caused Mark. "I never wanted to come between you and Mark," Richard said, his voice filled with regret. "But I can't deny how I feel about you." "I feel the same way," I admitted. "But we need to be careful. We can't ignore the consequences of our actions." Richard reached across the table and took my hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through me. "Anna, I care about you deeply, but we need to move forward with honesty and integrity." His words resonated with me, and I realized that whatever path we chose, it had to be grounded in truth and respect for everyone involved. We decided to take things slow, to give Mark and Helen time to process everything, and to ensure that we were making the right choices for the right reasons. Over the next few weeks, Richard and I continued to see each other, but our relationship remained platonic. We focused on getting to know each other better, building a foundation of trust and understanding. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and tension, but we were committed to navigating this complicated situation with care. One evening, as we walked through a quiet park, Richard turned to me, his expression serious. "Anna, I want you to know that whatever happens, I am here for you. We will face this together." His words brought me a sense of comfort and reassurance. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that we had the strength to face it. Our connection was real, and it was worth fighting for, even if it meant navigating a labyrinth of emotions and relationships. As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of hope and determination. The path forward was uncertain, but it was also filled with possibilities. Together, We would find a way to build a future that honored our feelings and respected the bonds that had brought us to this point. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I wasn't alone. Navigating the delicate and complex situation with Richard felt like walking a tightrope. Each step required careful consideration and balance. Although we had decided to take things slow and keep our relationship platonic, the intensity of our connection was undeniable. The weight of our secret grew heavier with each passing day, and I knew that eventually we would have to confront Mark and Helen with the truth. One weekend, Richard and I decided to have a candid conversation with Helen. We believed that she deserved to know about our feelings and the direction our relationship might be heading. Helen had been a pillar of strength and understanding throughout the whole ordeal, and she deserved our honesty. We invited Helen over to Richard's house for tea. I was a bundle of nerves as I prepared some sandwiches and set the table, trying to make everything perfect. Richard noticed my anxiety and gently squeezed my hand. "It'll be okay, Anna. We'll get through this together," he reassured me. When Helen arrived, she immediately sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between Richard and me with concern. We all sat down at the table, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Richard took a deep breath and began. "Helen, there's something important we need to talk to you about. It's about Anna and me." Helen's eyes widened slightly, but she remained calm. "Go on," she said, her voice steady. Richard continued. "We've developed feelings for each other. We didn't plan for this to happen, and we've tried to navigate it as carefully as possible. But we believe it's important to be honest with you about where we stand." The color drained from Helen's face, and she looked down at her hands, her expression a mix of shock and sadness. "I see," she said quietly. "And what about Mark? Have you told him?" I shook my head, feeling a lump in my throat. "No, we haven't. We wanted to talk to you first. We know this is a lot to process, and we're sorry for the pain it's causing." Helen took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. "I appreciate your honesty. This is incredibly difficult to hear, especially considering everything that's happened. But I believe that the truth is important. Mark deserves to know." Her words, though painful, were true. We needed to face Mark and give him the respect of hearing the truth from us. The thought of his reaction filled me with dread, but I knew it was the right thing to do. A few days later, Richard and I arranged to meet Mark at a neutral location, a quiet park where we could have a private conversation. As we waited for him to arrive, my heart pounded with anxiety. Richard stood beside me, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions. When Mark arrived, his expression was a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He approached us cautiously, his eyes flicking between Richard and me. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone guarded. Richard took a step forward. "Mark, we need to talk to you about something important. It's about Anna and me." Mark's eyes narrowed, and I could see the tension building in his posture. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, my voice shaking as I spoke. "Mark, I've developed feelings for your dad. We've tried to handle this as carefully as possible, but you deserve to know the truth." The impact of our words hit Mark like a physical blow. His face contorted with a mix of shock, betrayal, and anger. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the park. "My dad? How could you do this to me?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to maintain my composure. "Mark, I'm so sorry. We never intended for this to happen. Our feelings just developed, and we didn't want to hide the truth from you." Richard stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mark, I understand how hurt and angry you must be. This situation is far from ideal, and I'm deeply sorry for the pain it's causing you. But we believe that honesty is the only way forward." Mark's hands clenched into fists, and he took a step back, shaking his head in disbelief. "I trusted you both. I loved you, Anna. And now this? How can you expect me to just accept this?" I reached out, my voice pleading. "Mark, we don't expect you to accept it right away. We just wanted to be honest with you. You deserve the truth." The anger in Mark's eyes softened slightly, replaced by a deep sadness. "I need time to process this," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I need to figure out what comes next for me." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Richard and me standing in the park, the weight of our confession hanging heavily in the air. The confrontation had been as painful as we had anticipated, but it was a necessary step toward moving forward. In the days that followed, the fallout from our confession rippled through our lives. Mark distanced himself from both of us, needing space to process his emotions. Helen, though supportive of our honesty, struggled with the impact on her family. The tension was palpable and the future felt uncertain. Despite the challenges, Richard and I continued to support each other, knowing that the path we had chosen would be difficult but necessary. We remained committed to navigating our relationship with integrity and respect for everyone involved. As time went on, we began to see glimmers of hope. Mark reached out to Helen, expressing his desire to maintain a relationship with her despite the circumstances. It was a small step, but it showed that healing was possible. Richard and I focused on building our relationship on a foundation of trust and open communication. We knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but we were determined to face them together. Through it all, I learned that love is complex and often messy. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to face difficult truths. Our story was far from over, and while the path ahead was uncertain, I was hopeful that with time and patience we could find a way to heal and move forward. The road to reconciliation and understanding was long, but we were ready to take each step with care and compassion. Our journey had tested our strength and values, but it had also brought us closer together. And as we looked toward the future, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with love and resilience. The days and weeks following our confession to Mark were some of the most difficult I had ever experienced. The reality of the situation hit me hard, and the fallout was more intense than I had anticipated. Mark's reaction had been expected, but the pain of seeing him so hurt and betrayed lingered with me, and I knew it would for a long time. Mark completely cut off contact with me. His texts and calls ceased, and he avoided me at work. I tried to give him space, understanding that he needed time to process everything, but it was painful to be shut out so completely. Our friends noticed the tension and started asking questions, but I kept my responses vague, not wanting to drag them into the messy details. Helen, true to her nature, continued to be a source of support, even though I could see the strain in her eyes. She was dealing with her own emotions and trying to mediate between her son and husband, a position no one should ever be in. I admired her strength, but felt guilty for putting her in such a difficult situation. One evening, Helen invited me over to her house. I hesitated, not wanting to cause more stress, but she insisted, saying we needed to talk. When I arrived, she greeted me with a hug, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold shoulder I had been getting from Mark. We sat down in the living room, the same place where everything had started to unravel. Helen poured us both a cup of tea, her hands shaking slightly. "Anna," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I know this has been incredibly hard for you, but we need to discuss how to move forward." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm so sorry for everything, Helen. I never meant to cause this much pain." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I know, dear. None of us wanted this. But we're here now, and we have to deal with it. Mark is hurting, and he needs time, but he also needs to know that we're still a family." The weight of her words hit me hard. I knew that my actions had not only affected Mark, but had also put a strain on the entire family. "I want to make things right," I said, my voice breaking. "I just don't know how." Helen gave me a sad smile. "Time and patience, Anna. That's what it's going to take. Mark will come around, but he needs to process this in his own way." I left Helen's house that night feeling a mix of emotions. guilt, sadness, and a glimmer of hope. She believed that things could be mended, and that gave me a small sense of reassurance. But I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Richard and I continued to see each other, but we kept our relationship discreet. We didn't want to add fuel to the fire or make things harder for Mark. Our time together was bittersweet, filled with the joy of being with each other but also the constant reminder of the pain we had caused. One afternoon, Richard suggested that we take a break from the chaos and go on a short trip. "We need some time away from everything," he said, his eyes filled with concern. "Just a few days to clear our heads and figure out what's next." The idea of escaping, even for a little while, was incredibly appealing. We decided to go to a small cabin by a lake, a few hours' drive from the city. It was a place where we could relax and focus on each other without the weight of our current situation hanging over us. The trip was exactly what we needed. We spent our days hiking through the woods, enjoying the peace and quiet, and our evenings sitting by the fire talking about our hopes and fears. The time away allowed us to reconnect and strengthen our bond, reminding us why we had fallen for each other in the first place. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Richard took my hand. "Anna, I know this has been incredibly hard, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work. I believe in us." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him, feeling a rush of emotions. "I believe in us too, Richard. I'm just so scared of the fallout." He squeezed my hand, his expression serious. "We'll face it together, one step at a time. We just need to be patient and give Mark the time he needs." Our trip ended too soon, and we returned to the reality of our complicated lives. But the time away had given us a renewed sense of determination. We knew the road ahead would be tough, but we were ready to face it together. Back in the city, I reached out to Mark again, hoping that enough time had passed for him to at least talk to me. I sent him a text, keeping it simple. "Mark, I know you need space, but I hope we can talk soon. I'm here whenever you're ready." Days passed with no response, and I tried to focus on work and my relationship with Richard, but the uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that things might never be the same again. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Let's meet, tomorrow at 3 p.m., the usual cafe." My heart raced as I read his message. It was the first time he had reached out since our confrontation in the park. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready to face whatever he had to say. The next day I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. When Mark walked in, I stood up, my heart pounding. He looked different, more serious, more guarded. We sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "Anna, I've had a lot of time to think. What you and my dad did hurt me more than I can put into words. But I've come to realize that holding on to this anger isn't helping anyone." I felt a surge of hope. "Mark, I'm so sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you." He nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I know. And I can see that you and my dad are serious about this. It's going to take time, but I want to try and move past this, for my own sake, and for the families." Tears filled my eyes as I reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you, Mark. That means more than you know." We talked for a while longer, discussing how we could rebuild our relationship and what boundaries we needed to set moving forward. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. In the days that followed, things began to slowly improve. Mark and I took small steps to rebuild our friendship, and he started to reconnect with Richard as well. It was a long and painful process, but each step forward felt like a victory. Helen continued to be a source of strength for all of us, her unwavering support guiding us through the toughest moments. Our family dynamic had changed, but we were learning to adapt and find a new sense of normalcy. As the weeks turned into months, I realized that, while the fallout from our confession had been intense, it had also forced us to confront our true feelings and navigate our relationships with honesty and integrity. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that had brought us closer together in unexpected ways. Looking back, I saw that the path we had taken was filled with pain and uncertainty, but it had also been a journey of growth and self-discovery. We had faced our mistakes, learned from them, and emerged stronger and more resilient. As I stood with Richard, looking out at the sunset one evening, I felt a sense of peace and hope for the future. We had come a long way, and while there were still challenges ahead, I knew we would face them together with love and determination. The fallout had been intense, but it had also paved the way for healing and a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. Our story was far from over, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that we were stronger together. As Mark and I slowly began to rebuild our friendship, I felt a sense of relief. The tension was still there, but it was less palpable, less sharp. Richard and I continued to tread carefully, focusing on our bond while respecting the delicate situation we were in. Our relationship was tested daily, but it also grew stronger as we navigated the complexities together. One evening, as Richard and I were having dinner, he brought up a topic that had been on both our minds. "Anna," he began, "I think it's time we talk about how we want to move forward, what sacrifices we're willing to make for each other and for Mark." I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. "I know. We need to be clear about our intentions and make sure we're making decisions that are best for everyone." We spent hours discussing our future, considering every angle and every possible consequence. We knew that our relationship would require sacrifices not just from us but from those around us as well. It was a difficult conversation, but it was necessary. "I think we need to be patient," Richard said. "Give Mark the time he needs to fully process everything, and we need to make sure we're not pushing too hard, too fast." "I agree," I said, my voice steady, "and we need to be there for each other no matter what." In the following weeks, Richard and I continued to prioritize our relationship while being mindful of Mark's feelings. We spent more time together, building a life that felt right for us. We went on quiet dates, took weekend trips, and enjoyed the simple moments that brought us closer. One weekend, Richard suggested we visit a small coastal town he loved. It was a place he had visited often in his youth, and he wanted to share it with me. The town was charming, with its quaint shops and beautiful beaches. We spent our days exploring and our evenings watching the sunset, finding peace in each other's company. As we sat on the beach one evening watching the waves crash against the shore, Richard turned to me. "Anna, I know this hasn't been easy, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've brought so much joy into my life." I felt a rush of emotion and leaned into him. "You mean the world to me, Richard. I can't imagine my life without you." He smiled, his eyes filled with love. "We'll get through this, Anna. Together." Our bond was tested daily, but it also deepened with each challenge we faced. The love we shared was worth every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty. We knew that the journey ahead would be filled with more obstacles, but we were ready to face them together. Back in the city, we continued to navigate our complicated family dynamic. Mark slowly started to accept our relationship, though it was clear he still struggled with it. We respected his boundaries and gave him the space he needed, hoping that time would help heal the wounds. Helen remained a constant source of support, her strength and wisdom guiding us through the toughest moments. She helped bridge the gap between Mark and Richard, reminding us all of the importance of family. One evening, as we gathered for a family dinner, I looked around the table and felt a sense of gratitude. We had come a long way from the initial fallout, and while things were not perfect, they were getting better. We were finding a new normal, one that included love, sacrifice, and understanding. As we sat together, sharing stories and laughter, I realized that the journey we had taken had taught us valuable lessons about resilience and forgiveness. It had shown us the importance of honesty and the power of love. Our future was still uncertain, but I felt a sense of hope and determination. We were building a life together, one step at a time, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them with courage and unwavering support for each other. The love we shared was worth every sacrifice, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that we were stronger together. Our story was far from over, and I was excited to see where it would lead us next. As the months passed, the tension that had initially gripped our family began to loosen. Mark and I had managed to rebuild a tentative friendship, and while our interactions were still tinged with an underlying tension, they were improving. Richard and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and comforting. We navigated our complex situation with care and respect, always mindful of the delicate balance we were trying to maintain. One crisp autumn afternoon, Richard and I were enjoying a leisurely walk in the park. The trees were ablaze with vibrant colors, and the air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves. It was one of those perfect days where everything felt right. As we walked, hand in hand, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face lighting up with a surprised smile. "It's Mark," he said, showing me the message. "He wants to meet with both of us." My heart skipped a beat. It was the first time Mark had reached out to include Richard in a meeting. I felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. "What do you think he wants to talk about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Richard shrugged, though his eyes mirrored my apprehension. "I guess we'll find out." We arranged to meet Mark at a cozy cafe we all knew well. When we arrived, Mark was already there, sitting at a table in the back. He looked up as we approached, his expression serious but not hostile. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing for us to sit down. "Of course," Richard replied, taking a seat next to me. "What's on your mind, Mark?" Mark took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, "and I realized something. While I still don't fully understand everything that's happened, I can't keep holding on to this anger. It's tearing me apart." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I remained silent, letting Mark speak. "I want to try to move forward," he continued, "but I need to know something first." He looked directly at Richard, his eyes intense. "Dad, are you truly happy with Anna? Is this what you really want?" Richard's expression softened, and he reached across the table to place a hand on Mark's. "Yes, Mark. I am truly happy with Anna. She's brought so much joy into my life, and I can't imagine being without her. But your feelings matter too. We want to move forward in a way that respects everyone." Mark nodded, absorbing his father's words. He then turned to me. "Anna, I need to know if you're committed to making this work, not just with Dad, but with our entire family." I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. "I am, Mark. I love your dad deeply, but I also care about you and your family. I want to find a way for us all to move forward together." There was a long moment of silence as Mark considered our words. Finally, he nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Okay, let's try to make this work." It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in our journey. The three of us sat together, talking openly and honestly about our feelings and the challenges we faced. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. As we left the cafe that day, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We had taken a significant step toward healing and reconciliation. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were committed to navigating it together. In the weeks that followed, Mark, Richard, and I made a concerted effort to spend more time together. We went on family outings, shared meals, and slowly rebuilt the trust that had been shattered. It was a process filled with ups and downs, but each small victory brought us closer. One evening, as we were having dinner at Richard's house, Mark surprised us with an announcement. "I've been offered a job in another city," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It's a great opportunity, and I think it could be a fresh start for me." Richard and I exchanged a glance, both of us caught off guard by the news. "That's amazing, Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat. "When do you start?" "In a month," he replied. "I wanted to talk to you both before making a final decision. I know things are still complicated, but I think this could be good for me." Richard nodded, his eyes filled with pride and a touch of sadness. We'll support you no matter what, Mark. This is a great opportunity, and if it's what you want, you should go for it." Mark smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Anna." As the reality of Mark's impending move sank in, I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy for him, but I also knew I would miss him. However, I understood that this was a chance for Mark to find his own path and continue healing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. We helped Mark pack, celebrated his new job, and cherished the time we had left together. It was bittersweet, but it felt like the right step for everyone involved. On the day of Mark's departure, we all gathered at the train station to see him off. As he boarded the train, he turned back to us, his eyes bright with determination. "I'll stay in touch," he said, his voice strong. "We'll make this work." We waved as the train pulled away, a mixture of pride and longing in our hearts. It was the start of a new chapter for all of us, one filled with possibilities and hope. As Richard and I stood on the platform, watching the train disappear into the distance, I felt a sense of peace. We had faced incredible challenges and made difficult sacrifices, but we had also found love and resilience. Our journey was far from over, but we were stronger for it, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Mark's departure left a bittersweet void in our lives, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. With him settled in his new job and city, Richard and I found ourselves with more time to focus on our own paths. Our relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and we were determined to build a future together, despite the hurdles we had faced. One evening, Richard and I were sitting on the porch of his house, enjoying a quiet moment together. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the garden. I looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude and love. "Richard," I began, "I've been thinking about what comes next for us. We've come so far, but there's still so much more I want us to achieve." He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "I feel the same way, Anna. What are you thinking?" "I want to advance in my career," I said, my voice filled with determination. "And I want us to build a life together that reflects our dreams and ambitions, maybe even start our own business someday." Richard squeezed my hand. "I love that idea. We can do it together. What do you need to do to get started?" "I need to take on more challenging projects at work," I replied, "and maybe pursue some additional training or certifications. It's going to be tough, but I'm ready." Richard's support meant the world to me. With his encouragement, I began to focus on climbing the professional ladder. I volunteered for more complex assignments, took night classes to enhance my skills, and networked with industry professionals. It was exhausting but exhilarating, and I could feel myself growing both personally and professionally. Meanwhile, Richard was making strides in his own career. He had always been successful, but now he was driven by a new sense of purpose. He started exploring opportunities for advancement within his company, and even considered the possibility of launching a consulting firm. The thought of working together on a venture excited both of us. Our evenings were filled with discussions about our future, plans for potential business ideas, and dreams of what we could achieve. It was a time of growth and ambition, and we were each other's biggest cheerleaders. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to attend a local entrepreneur's workshop. It was a day-long event filled with seminars and networking opportunities. We were both eager to learn and connect with like-minded individuals. During a break between sessions, Richard and I found ourselves talking to a successful business owner named Claire. She was charismatic and full of energy, and she shared her journey of building a company from the ground up. "Success comes from passion and perseverance," Claire said, her eyes sparkling. "You have to be willing to take risks and believe in your vision, even when things get tough." Her words resonated deeply with both of us. As we left the workshop that evening, we felt inspired and motivated to take the next steps toward our goals. "Let's start planning our business," Richard said, excitement in his voice. "We have the skills, the drive, and now we have the inspiration." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's do it. We'll take it one step at a time, but I know we can make it happen." Over the next few months, we began to lay the groundwork for our business. We brainstormed ideas, conducted market research, and developed a business plan. It was challenging, but it brought us even closer together, united in our shared dream. As our professional lives flourished, so did our personal relationship. We found a balance between our ambitious goals and the simple joys of everyday life. We continued to support each other, celebrate our successes, and navigate the inevitable setbacks. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching another beautiful sunset, I turned to Richard with a smile. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" He nodded, his eyes filled with pride and love. "We have, Anna, and there's still so much more ahead of us." In that moment, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our journey had been filled with challenges and sacrifices, but it had also been marked by growth, love, and resilience. We were climbing the ladder together, and the future was bright with possibilities. As we looked toward the horizon, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together, with unwavering support and a shared vision for the future. Our story was still unfolding, and I was excited to see where it would lead us next. Months passed, and the foundation of our business started to take shape. Richard and I were thriving, both professionally and personally. Our shared vision for the future brought us closer, and our love was stronger than ever. However, amidst our busy lives, we received an unexpected call from Mark, who had been in his new city for almost a year. "Hey, Dad, Anna." Mark's voice came through the speakerphone, sounding cheerful and relaxed. "I've got some time off coming up and was thinking about coming home for a visit. How does next weekend sound?" Richard and I exchanged excited glances. "That sounds perfect, Mark," Richard replied, his voice filled with warmth. "We've missed you." "Yeah, we really have," I added, feeling a surge of happiness at the thought of seeing him again. The week flew by as we prepared for Mark's visit. We wanted everything to be perfect, so we tidied up the house, planned meals, and made sure to include some of Mark's favorite activities. It was a chance to reconnect and show him how much we valued our family bond. When Mark arrived, he was greeted with open arms. We hugged him tightly, and I could see a genuine smile on his face. The tension that had once marked our interactions seemed to have eased considerably. "It's good to be back," Mark said, looking around the house with a nostalgic expression. "I've missed this place." Throughout the weekend, we spent quality time together, catching up on each other's lives. We cooked meals as a family, shared stories, and even took a trip to the beach. It felt like old times, but with a renewed sense of understanding and connection. One evening, as we sat around a bonfire in the backyard, Mark turned to us with a thoughtful look. "I have to admit I was really angry when everything happened," he said, his voice steady but reflective. "But I've had a lot of time to think and realize that holding on to that anger wasn't helping anyone. I've seen how happy you both are, and I can't deny that it's real." Richard and I listened intently, our hearts swelling with gratitude. "We know it hasn't been easy, Mark," Richard said gently, "and we're so grateful that you're willing to work through this with us." Mark nodded, looking at the flickering flames. "I still have moments where it's hard, but I'm trying. I want us to be a family, even if it's a bit unconventional." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached over to squeeze Mark's hand. "Thank you, Mark. That means everything to us." The rest of the evening was filled with laughter and warmth, the bonfire casting a comforting glow over us. The sense of family and togetherness was stronger than it had been in a long time. As Mark's visit came to an end, we felt a renewed sense of hope and unity. He promised to stay in touch more often and visit whenever he could. The bond we had worked so hard to rebuild was growing stronger, and it felt like a new beginning. On the day of Mark's departure, we stood together at the train station waving him off. As the train pulled away, I felt a sense of pride and gratitude. Our family had faced incredible challenges, but we had emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Richard wrapped his arm around me, his eyes reflecting the same emotions I felt. "We've come a long way, Anna, and I know there's still so much more ahead of us." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Yes, there is, and we'll face it together. As we walked back to the car, I reflected on our journey. The past year had been filled with ups and downs, but it had also been marked by growth, love, and resilience. Our family was finding its way, one step at a time, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them with strength and unity. Returning home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Our story was still unfolding, and I was excited to see where it would lead us next. With Richard by my side and the support of our family, I knew we could achieve anything. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it one step at a time. With Mark's visit behind us and our business steadily growing, Richard and I found ourselves reflecting on the journey we had taken. The past year had been tumultuous, filled with challenges and heartbreak, but it had also brought us closer together and taught us invaluable lessons about love, forgiveness, and resilience. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our home watching the sunset, I turned to Richard, feeling a surge of gratitude. "We've come such a long way," I said softly. "I can't believe everything we've been through." Richard smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I know. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. We've grown so much, both individually and together." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. I never imagined that our lives would take this path, but I'm grateful for where we are now. We've built something beautiful. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying each other's presence. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden. It was a moment of peace and reflection, a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had to look forward to. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Richard took my hand. "Anna, I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've been my rock through everything, and I can't imagine my life without you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "I feel the same way, Richard. You've shown me what true love and commitment look like. I'm so grateful for you." We stayed on the porch long into the night, talking about our dreams for the future and the goals we wanted to achieve together. Our bond was stronger than ever, fortified by the trials we had faced and the love that had guided us through. In the days that followed, we continued to build our business and nurture our relationship. We faced each challenge with determination and optimism, knowing that we could overcome anything as long as we had each other. One Saturday morning, as we were working in our home office, we received a video call from Mark. He looked happier and more relaxed than we had seen him in a long time. "Hey, Dad, Anna," he said, his smile genuine. "I just wanted to let you know that things are going really well here. I've made some great friends and the job is fantastic." "That's wonderful to hear, Mark," Richard replied, pride evident in his voice. "We miss you, but we're so glad you're thriving." "We really are," I added, feeling a surge of joy. "And we can't wait for your next visit." Mark's smile widened. "Actually, I've been thinking about coming home for the holidays. It would be great to spend some quality time together." We eagerly agreed, making plans for a festive family gathering. The prospect of having Mark home for the holidays filled us with excitement and anticipation. It was another step toward healing and rebuilding our family. As the holiday season approached, our home was filled with warmth and laughter. We decorated the house, cooked delicious meals, and created new traditions. Mark's presence brought a sense of wholeness that we had been missing, and it was a reminder of the power of love and forgiveness. On Christmas Eve, as we gathered around the fireplace, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Our journey had been marked by pain and struggle, but it had also been filled with moments of joy and connection. We had faced our fears, embraced our vulnerabilities, and emerged stronger than ever. As I looked around at my family, I felt a surge of gratitude for the love that had carried us through. "I'm so proud of us," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "We've come a long way, and I know there's so much more to look forward to." Richard nodded, his eyes shining with love. "We've built something incredible together, and the best is yet to come." Mark raised his glass, a smile on his face. "To family, to love, and to the future." We clinked our glasses, toasting to the journey we had taken and the bright future ahead. Our story was one of resilience, love, and hope, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. As we settled into the warmth of our home, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our journey was far from over, but it was a journey I was excited to continue. With Richard and Mark by my side, I knew we could achieve anything. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. To everyone who has followed our story, thank you for being a part of our journey. Your support and encouragement have meant the world to us. As we look to the future, we invite you to share your own stories of resilience, love, and hope. Together, we can celebrate the beauty of life's journey and the incredible strength of the human spirit. What dreams are you working towards? What challenges have you overcome to get where you are today? Share your stories with us. We'd love to hear them. Thank you for reading, and may your own journey be filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.